What really happens when a small team steps off the map and into history? When silence matters more than speed and planning collapses the moment boots hit the ground. Special Forces movies promise precision, but some of them carry something heavier: memory, truth, consequence. In this list, we separate cinema shaped by real missions from stories that only pretend to be real. Some are uncomfortable, some are debated. One or two hide their truth in plain sight. Stay sharp. The line between fact and fiction is thinner than you think. Number 15, Bravo 20, 1999. This story begins with confidence and ends with silence. Bravo 20 tells the story of a British special patrol sent deep into enemy territory during the Gulf conflict. The mission sounds simple on paper: observe, report, leave unseen. But history rarely follows the plan. The film is based on first-hand accounts from members of the patrol, though even today those accounts remain disputed. That controversy is part of the film's power. This is not a clean victory story. It is a portrait of confusion, exhaustion, and decisions made while everything is already going wrong. The terrain is unforgiving. Communication breaks down. Weather turns hostile. Suddenly, training becomes survival. What makes Bravo 20 stand apart is its restraint. There is no heroic gloss, no swelling music telling you how to feel. The tension comes from watching discipline erode under pressure. The film leans into uncertainty. Who remembers correctly? Who misjudged what? The movie never fully answers those questions, and that honesty is intentional. Behind the scenes, advisors pushed for accuracy in movement, pacing, and group dynamics. The focus stays on endurance rather than spectacle. Critics argued over its version of events, but veterans recognized something deeper: the emotional weight of isolation, the strain of leadership when outcomes are no longer controllable. Bravo 20 is not about winning. It is about consequences. It reminds you that even elite units can be overwhelmed by timing, terrain, and chance. That uncomfortable truth is exactly why it still sparks debate decades later. But number 14, Kajaki, 2014. Nothing moves, yet everything is at risk. Kajaki is built around one of the most terrifying scenarios imaginable. A group of soldiers stranded in a hostile area where every step could end the mission permanently. No dramatic rescue sweep, no fast escape, just time, heat, and impossible choices. The film is based on a real incident involving British forces near the Kajaki Dam in Afghanistan. What sets it apart is how little actually happens on screen, and how intense it feels because of that. The danger is invisible. The tension comes from stillness, from waiting, from calculating whether helping a teammate might put everyone else in danger. The production chose realism over comfort. Actors trained under harsh conditions to replicate the mental strain of being stuck in place. The camera stays close, forcing the viewer to share the same claustrophobic dread. There are no speeches, no inspirational monologues, just controlled voices trying to stay steady. Kajaki refuses to exaggerate. It shows how modern missions can hinge on moments that never make headlines. Patience becomes courage. Discipline becomes lifeline. Critics praised its authenticity, while some viewers found it unsettlingly quiet. That discomfort is the point. This is not a film about strategy. It is about restraint, about how professionalism is tested when the smartest move is to not move at all. Kajaki leaves you with respect for the unseen risks that define real operations. Sometimes survival depends on doing nothing perfectly. Number 13, Hyena Road, 2015. Some missions exist in gray zones that history never resolves. Hyena Road follows a Canadian task group navigating a conflict where alliances shift daily and objectives blur faster than they are explained. Inspired by real experiences of Canadian Special Operations personnel, the film focuses less on action and more on consequence. At its center is a decision: build a road that could stabilize a region or abandon it to chaos. The title refers to a real supply route whose construction carried enormous risk. Every move attracts attention. Every delay creates danger. The enemy is not always visible, and neither are friends. The film does something rare. It shows how modern operations are shaped by politics as much as planning. Orders change, promises break. Local partners carry histories outsiders barely understand. The tension comes from navigating trust, not force. Behind the scenes, the director drew heavily from personal experience, grounding the story in lived moments rather than dramatized events. Dialogue stays sharp and understated. Characters feel burdened rather than brave. Hyena Road does not offer clean answers. It questions whether success can even be measured in these environments. Critics called it thoughtful and unsettling. Veterans praised its honesty. This is a film about responsibility, about how decisions ripple outward long after teams leave the area. Hyena Road reminds you that modern missions are rarely about winning ground. They are about choosing which risks you are willing to carry forward. Number 12, Mosul, 2019. This story doesn't ask for permission. It pulls you inside. Mosul follows an elite Iraqi police unit fighting to reclaim their city during the battle against extremist control. The story is inspired by real reporting from journalists embedded with local forces, and it shows a side of modern conflict rarely centered in cinema. What makes Mosul powerful is perspective. The characters are not visitors. This is their home. Every street carries memory. Every building holds loss. The unit operates with precision, but also with urgency. Failure is not abstract. It means losing family, history, and identity. The film was produced with intense attention to cultural accuracy. Dialogue stays grounded. Performances feel lived in. There is no grand explanation of motives. The audience is expected to keep up. That trust creates immersion. Critics praised Mosul for its authenticity and restraint. The story avoids exaggeration, focusing instead on teamwork and resolve. There are no invincible heroes here, just people adapting under pressure. Mosul stands as a reminder that special operations are not defined by nationality. Discipline, loyalty, and courage look the same everywhere. The film challenges viewers to expand their understanding of who carries the burden of modern conflict. And once you step into this story, it does not let go easily. Number 11, Act of Valor, 2012. This film blurs the line between performance and reality. Act of Valor is structured like a traditional action movie, but its foundation is anything but typical. The story draws directly from real mission profiles used by modern naval special units. The roles are performed not by actors, but by active duty personnel at the time of filming. That choice changes everything. Movements feel precise. Communication feels clipped and purposeful. There is no theatrical exaggeration in how teams operate. The film emphasizes coordination and timing over personality. While the central story is fictional, nearly every scenario reflects real-world operations: maritime insertion, remote surveillance, rapid extraction. The filmmakers worked closely with advisors to ensure authenticity in pacing and procedure. Critics were divided. Some felt the performances were restrained. Others argued that restraint was exactly the point. This was not meant to be dramatic. It was meant to feel routine, professional, controlled. Act of Valor became a cultural talking point because it challenged expectations. It asked viewers to accept realism over charisma. Over time, its reputation has grown among audiences interested in accuracy rather than spectacle. This film reminds you that real operations are not loud or emotional. They are quiet, deliberate, and executed without celebration. That grounded approach is what gives Act of Valor its lasting impact. Each entry stands alone as a complete mini-story. Number 10, The Outpost, 2020. This was a place everyone knew should never have existed. The Outpost tells the story of Combat Outpost Keating, one of the most isolated and vulnerable positions held by coalition forces in Afghanistan. Built at the bottom of 3 steep ridgelines, it was surrounded, observed, and constantly tested. The film is based on first-hand accounts from the soldiers who lived there. From the opening moments, the movie makes something clear. This was not a mistake made in the field. It was a decision made far away. Leadership placed a small unit in a position where defense required near perfection every day. The tension comes from that imbalance. The film focuses on routine before crisis, guard shifts, quiet jokes, fatigue that never lifts. When the attack finally comes, it feels overwhelming not because of noise, but because you understand how trapped everyone already was. The production worked closely with survivors to recreate layouts, habits, and relationships. Dialogue is understated. Performances feel restrained and grounded. There is no grand framing of heroism, only determination under impossible pressure. Critics praised the film for its honesty. Veterans described it as uncomfortably accurate. The Outpost does not ask you to admire tactics. It asks you to consider responsibility. It shows how courage often means holding ground you never should have been ordered to hold. This is a story about endurance in a place designed for failure. Number 9, American Sniper, 2014. This story is not about glory. It is about repetition. American Sniper is inspired by the real experiences of a Navy Special Operations marksman deployed multiple times to Iraq. Rather than focusing on one dramatic mission, The film shows how modern special forces work through endurance, long hours, repeated deployments, familiar streets that never feel safe. What separates this film from typical action stories is its attention to routine, overwatch positions, quiet observation, split-second decisions made after days of waiting. The tension does not come from constant movement, but from stillness and responsibility. The film draws heavily from first-hand accounts, emphasizing how precision roles carry psychological weight. Every decision matters. Every outcome lingers. The story avoids presenting its central figure as invincible. Instead, it shows how repeated exposure changes perspective over time. Production advisors pushed for realism in pacing and procedure. Scenes are framed to feel restrained rather than dramatic. Silence is used deliberately. The film allows moments to breathe, letting the audience feel the passage of time. Reactions to American Sniper were intense and divided, but many veterans recognized its emotional accuracy. It captured the unseen cost of sustained operations rather than the excitement of single missions. This film earns its place because it shows a side of special operations rarely explored. Not the mission itself, but what happens when the mission never really ends. Number 8. Rescue Dawn, 2006. Survival became the mission when the mission disappeared. Rescue Dawn is based on the real experiences of Dieter Dengler, a pilot who survived capture and escape during the Vietnam conflict. The film focuses less on combat and more on endurance, willpower, and clarity under collapse. From the start, the story strips away comfort, jungle heat, isolation, hunger, confusion. The environment becomes the antagonist. The danger is constant, but rarely visible. The film avoids sensationalism. Instead, it shows the slow erosion of strength and the mental discipline required to keep moving forward. Every decision is calculated. Every mistake costs energy that cannot be replaced. Production choices reinforced realism. Actors endured extreme conditions. Dialogue was kept minimal. Long stretches of silence allow the audience to feel time passing rather than watching it. Rescue Dawn earned praise for its respectful portrayal of survival rather than spectacle. The focus stays on human limits, how far the body can go, how stubborn the mind must become. This film reminds viewers that special operations do not always end with extraction or success. Sometimes they end with escape measured one step at a time. Rescue Dawn is about resilience when structure is gone and only resolve remains. Number 7. The Siege of Jadotville, 2016. History called it a defeat. Reality tells a different story. The Siege of Jadotville recounts the real stand of Irish UN troops surrounded by a much larger force during a peacekeeping mission in the Congo. Isolated, undersupplied, and ignored by command, they held their position against overwhelming odds. The film reframes the event not as failure, but as discipline under pressure. These were not elite commandos by reputation, but they performed with precision, coordination, and restraint that rivaled any special unit. What makes the story powerful is how restraint becomes strength. Ammunition is rationed, movement is calculated, leadership adapts constantly. The unit survives because it refuses panic. The filmmakers leaned heavily on military records and veteran testimony. Tactics shown on screen reflect real defensive planning. Dialogue stays focused and grounded. For decades, the real soldiers received little recognition. The film helped correct that silence. Critics praised its clarity and respect. Veterans praised its accuracy. The Siege of Jadotville challenges assumptions about what defines special operations. It proves that training, discipline, and unity matter more than labels. Sometimes excellence appears where history forgot to look. Number 6. Zero Dark 30, 2012. This story unfolds one fragment at a time. Zero Dark 30 follows the long intelligence trail that led to the location of a high-value target. The film focuses less on the final operation and more on the years of analysis, missteps, and persistence that made it possible. Rather than glorifying action, the movie emphasizes process. Data collection, pattern recognition, human error, long stretches where nothing seems to move forward. That patience becomes the real protagonist. The final mission is portrayed with restraint, clean, quiet, purposeful. The emphasis stays on coordination rather than drama. The film avoids celebration, ending instead with reflection. Production advisors ensured procedures felt authentic without over-explanation. Viewers are expected to observe, not be guided. This approach sparked debate, but also respect. Zero Dark 30 divided critics, yet its influence remains strong. It reshaped how modern intelligence and special operations are portrayed on screen. This is not a film about triumph. It is about focus, about how persistence over years can hinge on a single night. and how even the most precise missions leave questions that do not fade with success. Number 5. Tears of the Sun, 2003. This mission was supposed to end quickly. It didn't. Tears of the Sun is inspired by real evacuation operations carried out by American Special Forces during civil unrest in West Africa. The assignment appears simple. Extract a civilian target. Avoid involvement. Leave quietly. But reality refuses to cooperate. What gives this story weight is the moment the mission shifts. Orders are clear, yet conscience complicates everything. The team must decide whether following instructions is enough when people are left behind. That tension drives every step forward. The film emphasizes movement through hostile terrain rather than spectacle. Long marches, constant vigilance, limited visibility. Every decision slows progress and increases risk. The environment becomes the pressure point, not the opposition. Production advisors worked closely to ground the team's behavior in real procedure. Formations feel deliberate. Communication is minimal. The group operates with discipline shaped by experience rather than emotion. Critics often underestimated the film, but many veterans pointed to its emotional accuracy. It captures how modern missions can turn into moral tests rather than tactical ones. Not everything fits inside a briefing. Tears of the Sun earns its place because it shows that special operations are not only about execution, they are about choice. And sometimes the hardest part of a mission is deciding what success actually means. Number 4. Lone Survivor, 2013. The plan was precise. The reality was unforgiving. Lone Survivor is based on Operation Red Wings, a mission that unraveled in mountainous terrain where visibility, timing, and chance turned against a small reconnaissance team. The film focuses on how quickly conditions shift once teams are compromised. The terrain becomes an obstacle. Movement becomes exposure. Every decision narrows options instead of expanding them. What sets Lone Survivor apart is its emphasis on sequence. One event triggers the next. There is no single mistake, only compounding pressure. The story shows how moral choices and operational consequences collide in unpredictable ways. The filmmakers worked closely with advisors to capture how teams communicate under stress. Dialogue is clipped, movements are purposeful, there is no excess. Reactions to the film were intense. Some praised its emotional honesty, others debated its framing. That debate mirrors the real-world discussion surrounding the mission itself. Lone Survivor does not present answers, it presents weight. The weight of decisions made without full information, the weight of loyalty when outcomes are uncertain. This film reminds viewers that special operations are not immune to chance. Even the best preparation cannot remove unpredictability. Sometimes survival depends on endurance long after plans collapse. Number 3, 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, 2016. When support disappears, responsibility remains. 13 Hours tells the story of a small security team defending a diplomatic compound during a night of sustained attacks. Inspired by real accounts, the film focuses on individuals forced to act while awaiting guidance that never arrives. The tension builds through delay, requests unanswered, orders unclear, time stretching while pressure increases. The story highlights how decisions are made when structure breaks down. The film emphasizes teamwork over heroics. Communication between teammates becomes the only constant. Preparation meets reality in sharp, uncomfortable ways. Production leaned into authenticity. Advisors ensured procedures and movement felt grounded. The camera stays close, keeping the audience inside the compound rather than observing from distance. Critics debated its politics, but many acknowledged its focus on accountability at the ground level. Veterans recognized the stress of waiting while knowing action may still be required. 13 Hours is a story about initiative, about acting responsibly when authority is distant. It shows that modern operations are often shaped by what does not happen as much as what does. This film lingers because it asks a difficult question. What do you do when the call never comes? Number 2, The Great Raid, 2005. This mission existed on borrowed time. The Great Raid tells the story of one of the most daring rescue operations of the Second World War. A small force was sent deep into occupied territory to free hundreds of imprisoned soldiers before they could be moved or lost forever. Failure was not an option. Delay meant disappearance. What gives this story its power is urgency without chaos. The plan required coordination across land, air, and local resistance groups, all while avoiding detection. Every movement was measured. Every signal mattered. The film emphasizes patience and restraint rather than speed. Unlike many rescue stories, this one respects complexity. The soldiers were exhausted before the mission even began. Supplies were limited. The terrain worked against them. And still, the operation moved forward because waiting was more dangerous than action. The filmmakers relied heavily on historical records and survivor testimony. Sets were built to match real locations. Timelines were preserved. The emphasis stayed on decision-making rather than spectacle. Critics praised the film for choosing realism over exaggeration. Veterans recognized the tension of knowing success depended on timing rather than force. The Great Raid earns its place because it captures what real missions often demand. Not bold gestures, but quiet precision under pressure. It is a reminder that some of the most important operations succeed not because they are loud, but because they arrive exactly when they must. Number 1. Blackhawk Down, 2001. This was never meant to be a long day. That's why it mattered. Blackhawk Down recounts the Battle of Mogadishu, where a short capture operation spiraled into a prolonged struggle for survival. Planning dissolved. Assumptions failed. Adaptation became the only option. The film is built from multiple real accounts, creating a fractured but honest portrait of confusion. Orders overlap, information lags, teams move without knowing the full picture. What makes this story endure is how quickly control disappears. Confidence fades, routine collapses. The city itself becomes an obstacle. The mission changes shape minute by minute. The production pushed relentlessly for authenticity. Movement patterns, communication breakdowns, and exhaustion were recreated with precision. Veterans often cite the film's portrayal of disorientation as uncomfortably accurate. Rather than offering heroes, the film presents responsibility. Decisions made under pressure carry lasting cost. There is no neat resolution. Black Hawk Down stands at number 1 because it changed how modern conflict is understood on screen. It exposed the fragility of planning and the importance of adaptability. This is not a story of dominance. It is a lesson in humility. And that lesson still echoes. Pure Myth 1. The Delta Force, 1986. This movie feels official. That's the illusion. The Delta Force presents a precision rescue mission that appears grounded in elite capability and flawless coordination. Everything looks deliberate. Every step seems approved, but no such mission ever took place. The film borrows imagery from real counterterror units, blending accurate visuals with a completely fictional operation. That combination convinced audiences they were watching something pulled from hidden files. They were not. Real special operations are defined by uncertainty, delays, and compromise. This story removes all three. Problems resolve instantly. Outcomes feel guaranteed. Consequences barely exist. Veterans have often pointed to this film as an example of how cinema reshapes expectations. It suggests confidence replaces planning. Reality does not work that way. The Delta Force matters not because it is accurate, but because it shows how easily realism can be manufactured. It is a myth polished to look like history. Pure Myth 2. Navy SEALs, 1990. This is not a mission, it is a fantasy. Navy SEALs presents a fictional operation driven by attitude, bravado, and simplified teamwork. While inspired by real unit imagery, the story itself has no historical foundation. Planning is brief. Execution is effortless. Risk feels optional. That is the opposite of how real operations unfold. Decisions are rewarded without cost. Complexity disappears in favor of confidence. At the time of release, audiences embraced its energy. Over time, its lack of realism became obvious. Veterans often cite it as a perfect example of style replacing substance. This film shaped pop culture expectations more than understanding. It looks convincing to those unfamiliar with real procedures, but it collapses under scrutiny. Navy SEALs is not history misunderstood. It is fiction accepted too easily. Pure Myth 3. Behind Enemy Lines, 2001. This one fooled people because it almost feels true. Behind Enemy Lines follows a downed pilot navigating hostile territory while command races to recover him. The tension feels authentic. The urgency feels grounded. The mission never happened. The film borrows heavily from real surveillance practices and Cold War imagery, then builds a fictional recovery around them. That blend made it believable. Real recovery efforts are slow, layered, and cautious. This story replaces patience with speed and precision. Obstacles appear exactly when needed. Solutions arrive just in time. Veterans have long pointed out how misleading that framing can be. Determination alone does not override planning, coordination, and risk. Behind Enemy Lines stands as a reminder that realism can be simulated, and when it is, fiction can quietly replace fact. So now you've seen the difference. Stories shaped by pressure, memory, and consequence, and stories shaped to feel real without ever being real. That line matters more than most people think. because real missions are messy, uncertain, and heavy with responsibility. If one of these surprised you, say which one. Share your take. And remember, the most convincing stories are not always the truest. Sometimes history whispers while fiction shouts.